Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Grand Page. I am your most humble and obedient servant, Page Ghost. Today I want to look at an article from a website called The Gamer. As you can see, the title is 8 Things That Don't Make Sense in Gotham Knights. Essentially what I want to do today is go through each of these things and, for the most part, kind of break them down and essentially debunk them. Before we get into that, though, I want to make something very, very clear. This is not a perfect game. Gotham Knights is not a perfect game. But it is better than how it was received. I am one of those people that really enjoyed the game, and I think it has a lot going for it, and I don't agree with a lot of the criticisms that came out with it on its release, especially a lot of the reviews from mainstream reviewers and things of that nature, though I don't typically follow a lot of mainstream reviewers to begin with. But without further ado, let's go ahead and start going through each of these one at a time. The first one, even though it's mentioned as number 8, being able to hurt citizens. Apparently this is a problem. It says to start, the Bat family is generally not a threat to innocent civilians. This is because, they're superheroes, that sort of thing. The game enables you to protect the people of Gotham City, so it's bizarre that this is an available feature to begin with. And then it makes a comparison with Marvel's Spider-Man and how you can't really interact with NPCs aside from doing high fives and selfies and whatnot. This is just a really bad take because take a look at the Spider-Man game, right? The fact that you can just run through citizens and not really interact with them, it essentially creates a world that you don't have an effect on. Now, you can make the same argument with Gotham Knights because whenever you run into citizens, it doesn't have a real effect. It's not like all of a sudden cops start coming after you more frequently or anything like that. But saying that this is a problem that you're able to hurt citizens just because it just doesn't hold water. There's not a whole lot of depth to this sort of critique on the game. Moving on to number 7, getting intel from random street factions. There's essentially this element in the game where whenever you beat up bad guys, these magnifying glasses, quote unquote, fall on the ground. You collect them, and it collects clues for intel, right? It says completing Gotham Knights story involves a lot of grinding. This is absolutely true. I think that's part of the fun of it, personally. Why random low-level criminals each have in-depth information about other villain factions is a mystery. The idea here is that you are pulling together a bunch of clues in order to figure out, quote unquote, the game does it automatically, but you're pulling together a lot of clues together to figure out the next heist or the next big crime that is going to occur, because throughout the night you solve smaller crimes, really usually crimes that are happening in real time, sort of thing, and then those clues will lead to future crimes that will happen later on. Because here's the thing, low level guys in any sort of crime group or whatever will have little details that whenever you add them together with a bunch of other information from their guys will lead to you to understanding other things. This similar critique could be made towards the Batman Arkham games, where you interrogate a random street thug and somehow he knows intel on the Riddler's riddles throughout a lot of the Arkham games. I remember at least Arkham City and Arkham Knight, and I think even Arkham Origins all had this thing where if you interrogated a random criminal, he'd have the insight on Riddler's riddles. That would make no sense because the Riddler wouldn't leave that sort of sensitive information in a random criminal. But no one ever said anything about that. So this here just doesn't Again, it doesn't hold water. It doesn't make any sense. And it's not like you get one clue and you all of a sudden know about 5 major crimes that are going to occur. You have to collect multiple clues from multiple low-level villains in order to develop and gain intel on multiple crimes. Typically, if you end a night of patrol with, say, 12 clues, quote unquote, it's a weird system that they use to measure it. But if you end a night with 12 clues, it'll typically have like 8 to 10 major crimes the next night, premeditated crimes that you can go after. So again, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't hold water. There's a reason why getting intel from random street factions actually makes sense. So, next one, the knighthood challenges. I'll just read directly from the article. The knighthood challenges are a way for each character to earn their stripes in the wake of Batman's passing. While you may expect these challenges to provide slight upgrades to your capabilities, you'll be surprised to learn just how much is restricted without them. Navigating the city via grapple can be a frustrating and clunky experience. It doesn't flow the way you'd hope. Knighthood challenges provide you with easier traversal through gliding, but it's strange you have to earn these abilities instead of unlocking the entire arsenal. If Batman is dead, you need to use every advantage you can think of. All right, again, this just does not hold water. First of all, the grappling works incredibly well in Gotham Knights, especially considering that an easy comparison would be able to be made with especially a game like Arkham Knight. But you already have this ability right off the get-go with the grapple in Gotham Knights where you can press the X button and you do this, X if you're on PlayStation, and you do this leap from the grapple point that you are currently on. And it allows you to sort of do this weird sort of link between grapple points where you do this leap and you grapple to the next point, you do this leap, grapple to the next point. I think something that could have actually been put in here instead of criticizing the grappling system is they should have criticized the parkour system, because the parkour system is severely lacking. I mentioned in my review, you can go and check that out on my channel. But in my review, there's little to no parkour. For example, whenever you come to a curve on a building, you're just not getting around it. You can't get on top of it because there's no dedicated jump button. Because it's a curve, you can't grapple on top of it. Curved tops or curved edges on buildings, you're pretty much done for. There's no way of traversing it. I think that is a much bigger oversight than the grappling system. And then on top of that, with the knighthood challenges, first of all, they don't take that long to unlock, especially if you focus on one particular character, because there's no requirement for you to unlock each character. However, on that flip side, if you decide to unlock each character's knighthood challenges, like I did, you get a feel for how each character plays, and you get ample time to work with the game systems that have been established. You can kind of see the knighthood challenges as a kind of tutorial for each character, because essentially you have to learn to play each character effectively if you want to unlock the knighthood challenges early on, which is exactly what I did. And doing the knighthood challenges effectively taught me what to do for each character. So again, knighthood challenges not making sense. That criticism does not make sense. Jumping is limited. This is actually something that I agree with, because jumping is contextual. There's no dedicated jump button. Wholeheartedly agree with this particular point. Jumping is limited. Yes, this does not make sense. Like I was saying with the curved edges on the buildings, that moments like that either needed some context to help you get over them with the parkour, or just give us a dedicated jump button so that way we could do it in the first place. The bat cycle camouflage. Okay, so maybe they haven't, I don't know if they've come out and officially said what the bat cycle actually is doing whenever it pops in and out of existence. But nonetheless, this doesn't hold water. because while reviewers were consistently comparing this to games like Arkham Knight, trying to show how bad this game is, Arkham Knight also did things similar to this. For example, when you called the Batmobile all of a sudden would appear like 5 feet away from Batman magically, as if that's where the Batmobile was before. This criticism just doesn't hold water. Whether the bat cycle is camouflaged or it phases in and out of reality or can pass through solid objects, whatever the case, nobody wants to sit around and wait for the bat cycle to get to your location from where it was before. This is just where you have to suspend your disbelief a little bit, have a little bit of suspension of disbelief, and let the game work. Let the game be a video game and just understand. Otherwise, I would be sitting here for ages waiting for the bat cycle to get back to me. So again, this just doesn't make this not making sense doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that this is a criticism of the game. Abnormally large, heavy hitter enemies. I don't know what games, fighting games, combat games you've been playing, thegamer.com, but this is commonplace in video games. This is very, very common to have large, heavy hitter enemies. What wouldn't make sense if this was every single enemy, but typically in any given sort of crime moment throughout the game, you'd run into maybe one or two of these, unless it's like an all-out gang fight between multiple gangs. Then you'd have a few more, or if it's a hideout, you'd have multiple there. This is it's also like the gamer hasn't read a comic book before, because comic books are full of large, heavy hitter enemies, because our heroes are supposed to have a challenge. We, the player, are supposed to have a challenge. And this here, I mean, the whole point of these video games, the whole point of these conflicts in comic books is that the bigger enemies, these bigger characters, are involved in these set pieces, so that way we can see interesting fights happen, so that way we can see interesting conflict occur, so that way we, the player, can have a challenge. I don't know what they wanted. Like, you want just every enemy to be normal size? Do you apply this knowledge or this critique to a character like Clayface? Because Clayface is abnormally large. Mr. Freeze was abnormally large. Why do they get away with it? These are leaders in the crime families, crime groups. They're going to be heavy hitters, and you need to pay extra close attention to them, right? It's called strategy. This particular critique makes no sense. Factions being difficult to fight with levels. An enemy can be a little too easy to defeat when you're just starting your game, but these wimpy NPCs only become increasingly difficult with time. The level of their difficulty changes as your level increases. Well, that's a typical RPG mechanic. It makes no sense from a story perspective. There's really no reason for these enemies to become more difficult to defeat as they continue to use the same movesets and have the same level of strength. As you progress, they'll become invulnerable to attacks for some time. This is just one of the many flaws of the leveling system in the game. It would have made sense if the NPC models were replaced by different, tougher goons, at least. So you want the game to stay the same, while you get better, so that way the game gets easier. So it's not how games should typically work. Game mechanics are introduced. You get good at those game mechanics, and the game gets tougher, so that way you get better at those mechanics. I don't know this person's particular playstyle with Gotham Knights, but again, going back to my experience with the Knighthood challenges, it forced me into the game system that the developers have in place. And this game heavily relies on perfect dodges and perfect hits. If you are not utilizing those systems, then the game is going to suck. Okay? And that's fine. If you're not good at those systems, just admit it, say this isn't your thing, whatever the case. All right? But nonetheless, you have to utilize the systems that the game gives you to be able to beat its game. All right? Doom Eternal does this. Doom Eternal does this incredibly well, where it forces you to play the game that the developers want you to play. If you don't play that way, you die. Same thing here. Same thing here. And then last point is the premeditated cases. Every now and then you'll come across a premeditated murder scene. Despite being premeditated murder, these cases don't seem to be prioritized by the Gotham Knights. Sometimes the Bat family will solve the murder and not follow up, which seems unusual for what would be more of a pressing matter. Why wouldn't these heroes jump at the chance to bring villains to justice? You'd think this would be a top priority for the group. Except for every time you solve one of these, a crime pops up in the location that solving the crime suggests. A lot of these premeditated murders, you stumble across a murder scene, and a lot of times the go-to clue is something that would show the player where who was involved and where most likely these people hang around in Gotham City. I think that's a better critique than the premeditated murder case itself. I think the better critique is how easy these cases are to solve, and you instantly know where the villains are after you solve it. It's a couple of button presses and boom, you solved it. I think that's a better critique than the overall case itself, because I think it's actually interesting to suddenly stumble upon a murder scene. I think that's interesting, and I think it's less interesting that it's so quickly solved by, this weapon is consistent with villains in this part of Gotham City, so we go over to that part of Gotham City and there's the criminals. I think that's a more important critique. So yeah, this was just a really, really bad take, I think, on Gotham Knights. Really don't think it's fair that something like this was put out like 2 months after the game came out. I think it's also very easy for people. People see this game as a very easy sort of target to critique, easy target to kind of make fun of and point out. I was able to tear apart a lot of these criticisms in however long this video was, but it wasn't very long. It didn't take me very long, and it came right off the top of my head. And this is coming from a guy who completed the story, but I haven't completed every element of the game yet, and yet even I know a lot of these criticisms just don't hold water. I wouldn't be surprised if this particular person just had a quota to meet and just threw some stuff together on a game that is popular to make fun of, and they just posted it to their website. So, not a whole lot else here. I was basically able to break down most of these, except for the one about the parkour and the jumping. I actually agree with them on that point. The jumping could really, really be a lot better. In fact, I think it needs a dedicated jump button rather than context-sensitive situations, because it often creates a lot of confusion around what you can or can't do. Anyways, if you enjoy this type of content, please consider subscribing. Leave a like, leave a comment. What do you think about my criticisms, my points? Do you agree with the article? Do you agree with me? Whatever the case, let me know below, and I will post again soon.